It is Wednesday, October 9th, 2024, and this is episode 4 of Night Talk. Eddie's back with us this evening. Welcome back, Eddie.
Yay, vive le Quebec, I'm back.
So, how was your trip?
It was great. Did a lot of exploring. We did pretty much a good chunk of France, the entire Côte d'Azur, and got to experience some real nice French culture. Enjoyed the French cuisine. I enjoyed the people there. We enjoyed touring and learning a lot about France, as a matter of fact, and in parallel, believe it or not, learning about Quebec at the same time. So it was a wonderful trip. Good weather, good all around food, good people, and at the end of the day, Gary, I do miss.
Well, that's very, very kind of you. You were missed as well on this end, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to hook up and do at least one show while you were away, which I like considering the distance and everything else that was involved. The technical aspect of it went very well.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I fired up at about 12:30 or so France time, and everything came up well. I was a little worried about the quality of the internet at the Airbnb we were at, but not a problem at all. I heard you clearly. It was nice that you saw me clearly and heard me clearly, and I thought it was one of our better episodes. It was a lot of fun doing it.
It was, and certainly, given the distance involved and everything, technically it went off without a hitch. Much better than at least the opening of the show here when the camera
Yeah.
jumped on me. We'll get
Oh,
that
okay.
fixed in a couple of minutes because you know what? We have a busy hour lined up. So we should get down to business. It's another testy week in the House of Commons with tensions rising on both sides of the floor. It began Monday with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre calling on Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly to condemn what he called genocidal chants from hateful mobs during protests marking the anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel last year. Joly didn't, saying, quote, "We stand with Jewish people." Poilievre then said Joly continues to pander to Hamas supporters and the Liberal Party as part of her leadership campaign rather than doing her job. Well, Joly protested, and yesterday House Speaker Greg Fergus agreed Poilievre was out of line, then denied Poilievre the opportunity to speak in the Commons for the day. Outside of the chamber, though, Poilievre had a lot to say.
But worse than anything else is what we see in our streets today. What has happened to our country? The division, the violence, the hate, the danger, the anti-Semitism that we've never seen before in this country. It's just yesterday. The Minister of Foreign Affairs did something unbelievable on the floor of the House of Commons. I read the genocidal comments that have been made by these radical mobs, and I said, would you just condemn it? From the river to the sea, she wouldn't condemn that. Israel will soon be gone. She wouldn't condemn that. There's only one solution, intifada, revolution. She wouldn't condemn that. She wouldn't even affirm Israel's right to retaliate against other countries attacking it. She should apologize. A foreign affairs minister in Canada should find it very easy to condemn those kinds of remarks, but she didn't because she's pandering politically, which is what Justin Trudeau has been doing for the last 9 years. Today, we see that on our streets, the organization Samadoun, which is a front for the PFLP, has been fomenting these violent and horrific protests and mob actions. This organization is a front for an already banned terrorist group, and it is an offense under Section 83.5 of the Criminal Code, as enacted by the Anti-Terrorism Act, to knowingly act on behalf of, at the direction of, or in association with a terrorist entity. Specifically, Samadoun's founder, Khalid Barakat, has been described by the Israeli government as a high-ranking member of the PFLP. The PFLP has been placed on the list of banned Canadian terrorist entities for 20 years. In 2021, the Israeli Ministry of National Defense designated Samadoun as an organization that is a subsidiary of the PFLP. Germany banned the Samadoun, saying that it served as an international network which disseminates anti-Israel and anti-Jewish propaganda and supported and glorified various foreign terrorist organizations, including Hamas. Samadoun's leadership was deported from Germany, refused entry into the EU in 2022, and both times they were returned and, of course, welcomed to Canada. In 2019, PayPal, DonorBox, and Plaid shut out online donations to Samadoun due to its alleged links to the PFLP, following an incident in June where the PFLP issued an official statement of gratitude to Samadoun for its support of its prisoners. And Samadoun's Canadian leader, Charlotte Cates, has traveled to Iran and appeared on state TV, where she described Hamas's actions of October 7th as brave and heroic. Her organization has gone on to make numerous glorifications of October the 7th, specifically saying, this was what she said, her group said yesterday, long live October 7th. October 7th, the inception of the Al-Aqsa flood, the day that made clear to the world that Palestinian people and their armed resistance can and will liberate Palestine, and that the entire region will be free of Zionism and imperialism. The great flood toward liberation. On October 7th, 2023, Mohammed Deif, commander of the Al-Qassam brigades and the Palestinian resistance, said, "Today, the people reclaim their revolution, correct their path, and return to the march and return to the march of return." And finally, yesterday, the organization chanted in our streets, in Canadian streets, death to Canada, death to the United States, and death to Israel. So this is a terrorist organization. Common sense conservatives are calling for the government under Section 83.03 of the Criminal Code to ban Samadoun now. And let's bring home safety and security and peace to our streets. Let's unify our people. Let's end the crime by locking up the dangerous, repeat offenders. Let's secure our borders. Let's keep terrorists out of our country. And let's stand up for what's right once again. Stand with our allies against terrorism and for decency. Let's bring home the country that we knew and still love.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do a complete reboot of our system. We really apologize for the technical inconvenience, and hopefully you can rejoin us in a few minutes. Thank you very much. When the hell does the riot squad get called in? I mean, that could have accelerated into something a lot more dangerous in terms of public safety. I just don't know. I was just beside myself. Now, at the end of the day, Gary, there's a couple of things we need to look at. One, I agree with you 100% that Canadian presence internationally, whether in terms of peacekeeping or reputation as peacekeepers, is it's not becoming a joke. I think it has become a joke. I think as Canadians, we become very complacent, especially our government's becoming very complacent in terms of the role that our great country played in previous conflicts. We were always there, blue hats and all, Canadian flag, we were there. And you know what? That's no longer the case. You don't see us taking a lead in terms of any military force that's being deployed by the United Nations for peacekeeping efforts. I think the last time we saw something significant, and excuse me if I don't remember the general's name, General Dallaire out in the Bosnian conflict. I mean, the Canadian military was significant in terms of the role in trying to offer peacekeeping services to a place that was completely decimated by war. You don't see that anymore. There's been plenty of conflict around the world over the last few years where you would typically expect a Canadian presence. I mean, to draw a parallel, we basically are looking at, hey, we used to be a powerhouse when it came to peacekeeping efforts and our peacekeeping forces around the world, right? So here we are 15 years later. Yeah, we're still a wonderful peacekeeping force, and let's look at the legacy of the Canadian military, and we're so great. You know what that sounds like? That sounds like the Montreal Canadiens 3 years ago where they couldn't win a game, and all we kept on doing is playing videos of Jean Beliveau and Lafleur and Maurice Richard. Yeah, we're the greatest hockey team on the planet, and hooray, hooray! It sounds like a very similar parallel. So, to that first point, Gary, I think you're absolutely right. We've completely lost our place in the world in terms of placement of CSIS, our agency for international securities, as well as our military, which is consistently underfunded by not just the liberal government, even governments before that. And you look at what's going on and how do we come out of this and rebuild our reputation. And I think just with this incident between Poilievre and Joly, that's going to make the news in Europe. I saw news in France which covered Canadian politics. I'm sorry to say it does, especially things like this when they happen, right? On the second point that I wanted to just briefly comment on, Gary, is you kind of try to evaluate the body language and the face under the mask that's perpetuating this particular travesty of destroying our Canadian flag in Vancouver. Okay, younger generation, very young looking. They didn't look as good as you and I do, Gary. They look significantly younger, of course, right? And you kind of look at this and you say, you're here probably directly from said country that's in turmoil right now, or you're the offspring of somebody who came over here years ago to get a better life in Canada. Okay. Now, the reason why you're there, A, as an international foreign student, which your taxes and my taxes are paying for their education, or the effort that your parents made in terms of bringing you to a country so you can actually get a wonderful education and live in a great country safely with health services and whatnot. And you do that, you defile our country, our flag, in front of 39 million people who love this country. Everybody's got a problem with their country. We hate the taxes, we hate what the politicians are doing, but there's a certain level of pride, okay, living in Canada. It's a great country until you see that. And I am really upset. I was spitting nails this morning when I saw these individuals tearing up our flag on our soil while you're living the benefits of what this country offers to you. Shame on you. Shame on your parents. I'm really upset by what I saw. That should never, never, never be tolerated. And you know what? I'm sure there's a lot of Canadians that are in agreement with both of us that this is just a total travesty. And like to your first point, this is something that could have been prevented, and we've done nothing in years to prevent that from happening with some of these rogue associations or affiliations to terrorist groups overseas running roughshod. They're just doing what they want, recruiting, using social media to corrupt young minds. And I think that was a clear example of what we actually saw in Vancouver, that they are starting to win some of this battle. And it's an uphill battle, right?
They are, and the other side of it is, Eddie, let's go back about a year ago when we had the uproar over the so-called secretive Chinese police stations here on Canadian soil.
Yes.
Those establishments were noted very early on, but not with, no action was taken really until it blew up. And once it blew up in the public domain, then all of a sudden there's a bit of a push on. But you have some leaders sort of saying, well, let's not get everybody into an uproar, or let's be careful on what we say and how we say it, and what have you. But the fact of the matter is, we cannot deny that there is all kinds of foreign interference in our daily lives in this country, because we are such an easy target.
Yeah.
And is there any kind of foreign interference in our elections? Let me tell you that, there is. And if you don't think there isn't any kind of boiler room somewhere where there's, pounding out the social media messages and the disinformation messages and everything, then you know what? I have a mud hole that I can sell you, which is full of dreams and pixie dust and sand. And I'll give it to you for $100 and we'll all go away smiling. We need to get tougher. And what we saw last night in the building lack of respect, even on display in the House of Commons over the last number of weeks, is, to me anyway, in my opinion, a result of us getting softer and trying to be Mr. Nice Guy, Miss Nice Gal to everyone and anyone. And you know what? If you have a society and your society is fashioned in a certain way, it's up to others to work within those parameters of your society. And if they don't, well, they have a choice. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, I know there are some people who are going to say, oh yeah, you're racist, you're this, you're that. No, I'm just phrasing it and framing it in a bigger picture. It doesn't matter who it is or what group it is. That's what's happening. We've become soft and we're getting softer, and the inmates are running the prison.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize on the point that you made, about us expressing our thoughts and many Canadians expressing their thoughts. They're not racist. You know what? If that was an Israeli demonstrator stepping on the Canadian flag, you and I would be having the same discussion in terms of this is not something you do here. If it was a flag from another country that's in turmoil because they didn't like the way our government's handling something or supporting some kind of a company or whatever the case is, still unacceptable. You're here in Canada living a great life, and you're reaping the benefits of living a great life here for the wrong purposes. I mean, you don't do stuff like that. So I don't care what race, color, creed, preference in life, and whatever the case it is. You don't do that here, period. And I think you would be hard pressed, Gary, and I would be hard pressed, Gary, to find somebody of reasonable logic and mind that would look at that and say, yeah, that's good. I don't know. I'm not playing for either hockey team right now, but I just feel as a Canadian that's not something that should happen here. And you know what, Gary, we're talking about some of these extremist groups manipulating a lot of the folks that might be pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli or not pro-Israeli, whatever the case is. We had the same situation happen in our backyard not too long ago, which you and I discussed in great detail. I think it was episode 2 or episode 1, I can't remember. This same group had their hands directly in the cookie jar in setting up the protests that happened on McGill University campus that lasted for months. Okay, it was clear-cut proven that they were actively engaged in pushing that extreme agenda, and individuals took that upon themselves and basically held the university hostage for a couple of months. And again, we run into a very similar situation, Gary, where the authorities, for probably more political reasons than proper reasons in terms of common sense and proper governing and proper security, did nothing for months. And I heard a lot of comments made about our police force being inadequate and just didn't have the mettle to go ahead and just clean the place out. No, these poor guys were waiting for orders. And where does the police force get orders? From the governments. The Canadian government said nothing. The Quebec government said, well, you know what, something should be done, but it's up to the municipality to do it. Geez, thank you very much for the support of your police force in doing their job. So what ends up happening? Just like what we saw in Vancouver. The police force just stands around and watches it happen. I don't know. It'd be great to hear from some of our viewers and what they think. What could be done, what can't be done. But wow, it's like I like your analogy, closing the barn doors when the horse has already escaped. How do you reel all this back in now, right?
Well, that's the other side of it. And first of all, we have to start getting serious about the kind of budgets that we're putting to the military, putting to the to CSIS, and putting to the RCMP and their upper branches that work with CSIS and the military in providing security across the nation. And then on top of that, we have to get serious about building our armed forces up to a reasonable level. When you have last year, I believe it was, the top military brass telling the federal government, you can't rely on us this coming summer to help you fight wildfires because we don't have the personnel to spare. That's a pretty damning statement in a whole lot of ways, you know.
Yeah.
And coming back to very early on in our discussion, the UN peacekeeping roles that we used to play, there's a whole other institution where it's become a waste of time. The UN has long since outlived its shelf life, its mandate. To me, I believe now more than ever, any of the nations who are actually paying their UN dues every year, I think really probably could redirect that money to within their own countries and again spending on their security, intelligence community and on their own military as well. Because the UN really, when was the last time you really saw the UN discuss an issue, a crisis, where there was really something meaningful coming from that discussion and some kind of meaningful action taken? There's, with the vetoes that Russia has at times and China, like, what's the point? That's some pretty expensive and valuable real estate in the heart of New York. Sell it and let's move on. But that's a whole other show.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it's just it was just. I mean, at the end of the day, Gary, you and I are very devout Canadians and proud Canadians, regardless of what our issues and concerns are across the country and shortcomings. And there's been a lot of shortcomings with the previous president, previous governments, and they all do. But being a proud Canadian and living a good life here in Canada, to see something like that happen on our soil is just very shameful, very, very shameful on two fronts. That people can feel that it's okay. I can do that because I'm in Canada, taking advantage of our freedom of speech, freedom to protest, as long as it's peaceful. And then the other one, the lack of or the inactivity by our local authorities to prevent that from happening, and our federal authorities from preventing that from happening. And at the end of the day, that comes from the floor. That comes from our offices and our government in Ottawa. So at the end of the day, circling back to the piece that you showed our audience, you know what? Yes, Poilievre is very rhetoric heavy, but a lot of what he says speaks into what you and I have been discussing for the last 20 minutes. Where is our government condemning organizations that have been branded as terrorist groups in other major countries, like the I group that you were mentioning? They've all been branded a terrorist organization, and those individuals that have membership cards, if you want to call it, you're just running roughshod in our country. What's going to be next? Somebody's going to leave a bomb in a mailbox someplace? Oh, and then they're going to react because somebody got killed? Well, that's a little too late, right? So I'm just very, very, I'm very saddened. I'm ashamed. I'm not ashamed to be Canadian. I'm actually prouder to be Canadian now, where I really would like to see some action, as you were saying, some action, Gary, by our leaders to demonstrate around the world that no, we're drawing a line in the sand again. Maybe 5, 10 years too late, but you're no longer going to be able to do this, and take some action. Damn the politics, get the job done. This is just absolutely wrong, and I'm getting very frustrated with this. Just like when I looked at your face this morning, I wasn't sure if I should come through the door or not.
You should have been here last night
Yeah.
at about 1 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, all right, so I think we'll leave that there for the moment and move to a slightly lighter note with most Canadian teams, and including the hometown Canadiens opening their NHL season tonight. Vancouver was the only one not playing. And it's a classic matchup for the Habs tonight.
Yes, it is. And you being a former Maple Leaf fan, I'm very pleased to announce the Canadians are leading 1-0.
Thanks a lot. Let's see if we can play this clip and hopefully we'll have audio. Let's give it a try anyway. Okay.
No, it won't launch.
Yeah,
We'll work around that. You know what? We'll play it next week.
yeah. How about that? After you find out that the Leafs win tonight 3-2.
Oh, I see. Okay. Want to put some money on that? Well, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, the whole subject matter is, and Gary's absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of wrong that's happening in the world, and we know it's of interest to fellow Canadians, and there's a lot of lighter side for the great things in our country, and the start of the National Hockey League season is right up there in terms of what's great about our country. Yeah, you're right, Gary. All of our Canadian teams, except I believe the Ottawa Senators, are in action tonight. So it's a wonderful night for the hockey fans in Canada, around the world, and the northern part of the states. I mean, there are a lot of hockey states north. And the exciting thing about us here, from a Habs fan perspective, and also in terms of the Toronto Maple Leafs, I mean, both organizations made some qualified, significant changes to try to get to that next step, right? Let's talk about the Maple Leafs first, if we should. Just give me a few minutes on that.
They've been rebuilding since 1967.
Yes, they have. But you know what? Toronto has to get out of this mindset where we're going to destroy the league in terms of our wins, the goals we score, the assists, and yabba dabba doo. Our superstar just scored 67 goals or 68 during the regular season. What a fantastic player! And then as soon as the puck drops in playoff time, the superstars disappear. So I guess that's all to say that every hockey team, in terms of championship, in terms of a drive for a championship, has to be a very, very diverse team. You have your superstars, you have your goal scorers, you have your defensemen, you have your 5'6" players, you have your 7'6" players, and as a team, as a cohesive unit, you make their drive for the Stanley Cup. So there's a certain character, and I think it was our Bergevin, the former general manager of the Canadiens, basically came out and said there are players in hockey teams that get you through the season, and then there are those that get you through the playoffs. And unfortunately for both the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs, that was not the case and has not been the case. I really wish Toronto can make that jump beyond the first round. Do I think they'll be able to make it? I think they got a better chance because they got quite a few more players that have a mean streak in them, and you probably saw that in the first preseason matchup when they took out two of the Montreal Canadiens. So they certainly meant business in the preseason, which is a positive sign for the Maple Leafs. And I wish them luck, and I wish you luck, Gary. Okay. From the Montreal Canadiens' perspective, I'm really, really excited about the Habs team this year. I've been a diehard fan for the Habs for a long, long, long time, and I fell off the bandwagon 15 years ago, just with complete, absolute mismanagement of this once glorious franchise. And to tell you frankly, I was getting tired of watching our local television stations, both English and French, continuously harp on how great we used to be. I was done with how great we used to be. But since management changed completely here with Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton, they are both business savvy. They understand the profession of professional hockey and how to actually run a hockey business. And I think they've been given free rein in terms of what they need to do because Jeff Molson sees that he's got qualified hockey people employed and on the payroll. And this has nothing to do with language. This has nothing to do with background. This is just putting the best hockey team together, and this is from the president of the company right down to the Zamboni driver. They have the right people in place. And if I remember my numbers correctly, 80% of the hockey club right now is below the age of 22 and 23. And they are all solid hockey players brought on through draft. So last year, you got a sample of what exciting hockey meant to the city, the way it used to be played. I think they lost something like 27 games last year just by one goal, which is a significant step up from the previous year. And I think that the plan, and there has been a plan since Mr. Gorton arrived in the scene, they're executing. And back then they said, we're looking at 4 to 5 years before we can even talk about contending for a Stanley Cup. Well, I believe this is year number 4 for them, and they're already talking about being in the mix. Are they Stanley Cup? Quality right now? No, not yet. They need a little bit more grooming. They need to get a little bit more weight, and they still need to get a little height on the team because when it comes playoff time, that's when the big boys come out to play. So,
What about the fan base?
you know what? I think the fan base is pretty excited. Just a couple of days ago, I was taking my morning walk, and we don't live too far from the Bell Center. On a day when the Canadiens were not in town playing an exhibition game, there was already a lot of murmur outside of the La Cage au Sport restaurant. There was a lot of people in the Canadiens Hall of Fame Plaza out front, looking at the statues of Guy Lafleur and Beliveau. A lot of people milling about. That's not something I've seen in a long time. And it's very easy to get into a conversation with a hockey fan and speak about the Montreal Canadiens. And obviously, the rivalry with the Toronto Maple Leaf comes up. Can't wait for the game against the Boston Bruins, and even discussions about rivalry with the Ottawa Senators. This is good for hockey, and you know what? This is fantastic for Montreal too, because I think, and you read a lot of books written by journalists, written by people that are high in the society echelon of Quebec and Canada, and they'll talk about how closely tied the community of Quebec and Montreal are to the Montreal Canadiens, and just the spirit of the city when they have a team like the Canadiens to cheer for now compared to what they were 5 years ago. There's a pep in this step. People are very proud to speak about them. I'm very happy to speak about the Montreal Canadiens and what the future holds. 5 years ago, I would have said, next subject. Let's talk about football. I really didn't care. But for a change, I am actually caring. I've gone to see some of their games, or the farm teams, the Laval Rocket. I went to see a few of their games over the last couple of years. Those are some good, talented, big kids that are in their farm system. So the team has got a lot of depth. So if one player gets hurt, there's somebody ready to step in and willing to step in. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. I can't wait till they start fighting for a playoff spot. And it'll be interesting how far the Montreal Canadiens go, and it'll be very interesting to see how far the Toronto Maple Leafs go. If the core four show up for the playoffs, they'll go far. If they've done what they've done the last 5 years, they'll be playing golf after the first round as usual. And I sincerely hope I'm wrong. It'll make for good hockey to see Toronto advance as well.
How do you think Edmonton will do this year?
You know what? I think they'll be back. There hasn't been too many significant changes for them. They had from what I understood, they had a very strong farm system. So there's a lot of players that can move up. I think they're going to be in the Final Four for sure. Absolutely. I see them being in the Final Four. I also see the Dallas Stars vying for a Final Four, and maybe the Vancouver Canucks in that section of the league. Here on our side, I see Florida Panthers being in the Final Four. I can see the New York Rangers knocking on the door this year as well. And again, just as a matter of fact, Jeff Gorton came from the New York Rangers organization before he came to Montreal, and the New York Rangers used to be cellar dwellers, and in 3 or 4 years, they became contenders, and they've been contenders for the last 4 or 5 years after the fact that Mr. Gorton left. So Mr. Molson made a great acquisition, made a great hire by bringing this individual up to run the organization. So, you know what? On the outside, I see the Maple Leafs, and that all depends on their core four. If the core four do what they're supposed to do and put the puck in the net and play two-way hockey, I think they'll end up in the Final Four. Do I think we're going to see a Montreal-Toronto matchup in the Final Four? I don't think so. Love to see it, but I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you mentioned New York, and it just sparked a memory. I worked with someone in BC back in the late 90s, and he was probably one of the most diehard New York Rangers fans I've ever encountered. However, it was summed up nicely in his email address. It was Rangers0 at whatever. So he had a sense of humor along with it. And on bringing some politics into the hockey side of things tonight as well, did you see some of the protests in Quebec City last week when the $7 million preseason games with the Kings?
You know what? I mentioned on the onset of our piece about the Habs and the NHL season starting. Quebec City was also very heavily tied to their Quebec Nordiques, and it really made hockey interesting across the country, that rivalry. And, you know, when we look at our politicians using taxpayers' money from a promotion perspective, so they're in effect trying to create an environment where the NHL and Gary Bettman are going to look upon Quebec City favorably to move a franchise here, especially when they said, if you build it, we will come, and we built it, and they never came. Yeah, and for a variety of reasons, which is a whole other show in itself. Mm-hmm. But at any point, I think the protests, I think, were very well justified. Okay, here we have a medical system that needs fixing. Okay, you know what? It's $7 million. What was it? $7 million? I think the figure, Gary.
That's right.
$7 million. You know what? The government might think $7 million is a drop in the bucket, but no, $7 million is a lot of money that could have been used for a variety of things. You know what? The nurses and whatnot. Okay, $7 million split amongst 35,000 nurses is not a whole hell of a lot, but it could have bought a lot of equipment. It could have bought a CT scanner. What about teachers? You and I both know teachers that are dipping into their pockets to make sure that their students have enough supplies and materials and textbooks to learn from, to use. That is absolutely ridiculous. $7 million for a school board is a monumental amount of money. So I completely understand the protests and why a lot of citizens in the country and Quebec were really, really upset at Mr. Legault's decision to promote hockey. Now, let's flip the coin on the other side. I also understand, although I don't agree with him in his final decision, why they're doing this is because they're trying to promote Quebec as a hockey city, and we know it's a hockey city, and that they can sustain an NHL franchise in Quebec City. Much so where they do investments in other sporting events in the province. They invest in the comedy festival, which went defunct this year, but they still donated money for that. They donate money and they invest Canadian tax or Quebec taxpayers' money in the Grand Prix. There's a lot of subsidies that go into that. They subsidize other sporting events and other shows that have an appeal to the general population in Canada and the world to make Montreal seem like a really wonderful place to move to. So I can understand that from a promotion of tourism and the promotion of financial feasibility in sustaining these kinds of events. So I can see why he did it. I just think the timing of that was wrong, especially right when the Montreal Canadiens did this and they said, "Oh, Mr. Legault, you don't need Los Angeles. We'll come out there for free." Okay, and I think that's when the brouhaha started. Is when the Habs actually said they will go to Quebec City and do an exhibition, couple of exhibition games out there on their dime, right? So I'm ashamed of the Los Angeles Kings and Gary Bettman for taking the money and coming out there to play hockey when they probably saw that Legault was desperate for a hockey franchise out there, so they took advantage of the entire situation and says, "Thank you very much, we'll take your $7 million." And meanwhile, our teachers are out $7 million, and it is what it is. But it's funny though. I looked at some pieces online where a lot of fans came from afar. They came out as far as your neck of the woods, out in the Maritimes. They drove all the way to Quebec City just to watch a hockey game. So the draw from the fan perspective is definitely there. Apparently it was successful. I don't think they sold everything. They sold out the 2 nights. Fans were very happy with it that went. But at the end of the day, after a hockey game, we have to get back to reality. How much are our teachers spending out of pocket to educate our children? And is a remote region in Quebec, do they have to put a person on an airplane to fly 400 miles to get a CT scan? This could have gone up somewhere north, buy a CAT scanner or an MRI. It's just money that was not well spent, and it was spent at the wrong time, in my opinion.
Yeah, not well thought out at all. And you're talking about the teachers and out-of-pocket expenses. That brings up a whole other issue with education and healthcare both, and having a national standard for the healthcare system and the education system. And with that national standard comes real accountability. And anyway, we'll get into that in another show because I could go on probably for the rest of the evening. And I'm actually starting to calm down after the technical burps. So, yeah. Okay, well, why don't we just kind of take a quick hop out to the West Coast. And in the BC election campaign, they go to the polls this month. The leaders participated in a televised debate last night, as the latest poll shows the New Democrats regaining the lead from the Conservatives. The Leger poll shows 47% of decided voters supporting the David Eby-led NDP, while the Conservatives, led by John Rustad, have 42%. Now, the Conservatives had been leading the incumbent New Democrats since mid-September, and that's after the collapse of the BC United Party in late August. They just tore up the papers and said, "We're done." And that BC United Party came from what was left of the Provincial Liberal Party at the time. NDP leader David Eby maintains the highest approval rating at 46%, and Conservative John Rustad is coming in at 38%. Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau has 36%. During last night's debate, the Greens' Furstenau went after Rustad for his dark and gloomy view of the province and its future. Other issues included drugs and homelessness and government's role in the affordable housing crisis. The leaders also traded barbs over the cost of election promises. The Conservatives apparently have not released a costed platform, something that I thought had been pretty much written into election rules across the country, but apparently not in BC. That also led to debate over the carbon tax, with Rustad claiming the EB New Democrats would double the carbon tax, saying, quote, taxing people into poverty is not going to change the weather, Mr. Eby. Eby replied, no costed platform and a climate denier. With the Green leader, Sonia Furstenau, firing, quote, this is why we are stuck in the 20th century. Mm-hmm. Election day is October 19th. So that'll be, I think they're the first going to the polls this month. New Brunswick is on the 21st, I believe it is. Is that a Monday? Yeah. And Saskatchewan is just behind them. So we'll have 3 new or returning provincial governments. The New Brunswick campaign is getting really very interesting to watch. It's turning out to be a much tighter race with Conservative leader Blaine Higgs, the incumbent premier, just hanging on by a thread at the moment. Anyway, we'll probably have a quick update on them before they go to the polls because, Quebec shares at least some of its border with New Brunswick and some services back and forth from time to time. So especially up along the Gaspé Peninsula in that area would be of interest to Quebecers in that area. And then Saskatchewan, Premier Moe, it's interesting, very much along the same lines as what we've seen with Higgs in New Brunswick. Higgs kind of seems to throw the Conservative snowball and then some of the others pick it up. Doug Ford seems to kind of, he's become very good at just kind of playing it down the middle. He's an interesting character to watch for sure. So anyway, that's the latest on the BC election campaign. And with that, I guess we'll make it a wrap on tonight's show, somewhat extended, full of all kinds of surprises. And actually, turned out still to be a lot of fun. And if you're just catching the tail end of the show, once we finish, I'll be going to work and doing some magic and seeing what I can pull together of the first part of the show and blending it with the last part of the show, and it'll be posted on our YouTube webpage. So be watching for that if you want to know what else we were talking about. And again, I apologize, I'm not sure, but man, oh man, there have been little gremlins creeping into the setup here over the last 5 or 6 days. There have been just little things happening from time to time. So I'm not sure what it is, but it'll keep me busy over the next week hunting it down. So remember to subscribe. Please subscribe so you'll be notified, because we are planning at some point down the road to go live, just on the spur of the moment kind of thing. If something comes up and we just have to talk about it, just need to talk about it, just want to talk about it then and there, you'll get notified that, we're going live now, and you can tune in and watch. And also, please make sure to hit the like button, because that helps other people find us in the YouTube algorithm. So I want to thank you again for popping in and sticking with us. And from my side of Griffintown, I'm going to say good night, Eddie.
And from my side of Griffintown, a couple of floors up, good night, everybody. It was nice speaking to you tonight.
All right. Good night.
Bye.